We surely say so indeed, Socrates. Then I said, now then, even those who have but a little experience in geometry will indeed not dispute this point with us, that the self-knowledge altogether contradicts the common modes of expression used by those who are practiced in self. Glaucon. He said, how? Socrates. On the one hand, in some way and out of necessity, they speak quite ridiculously, for all the words they use appear to be spoken as if for the sake of some operation or practice. Thus they talk of making a square, of extending, of adjoining, and all the like. Whereas on the other hand, the whole of this study is somehow being practiced for the sake of intuitive knowledge. Gnoseos. Glaucon. He said, entirely so. Socrates. Even further, is it not the case then that this statement must be assented to? What is it? That it is the intuitive knowledge of that which always is, but absolutely not of that which in some way at some time is coming to be and being dissolved. Glaucon, he said, let it be granted. For the geometrical knowledge is of that which always is. Socrates. Accordingly then, O noble one, it draws the soul towards the truth, and it would be perfective of the understanding of a philosopher, so as to maintain this power above, which we now improperly direct below. Glaucon, he said, as much as possible. Socrates. Then I said, accordingly then, as much as possible, we must give orders so that those in this beautiful city of thine by no means neglect geometry, for even the byworks of self are not small. Glaucon, to which he then said, what byworks? Socrates. Surely those which thou mentioned that relate to war, and surely also relate to all learning, so that they will be received more beautifully. We know somehow that in respect to having learned geometry or not, will make all the difference in the world. Glaucon. Certainly, in every way, by Zeus. Let us then establish the second study for the youth. Let us establish it. What then? Shall we establish astronomy as third, or do you think not? Let us do so, as far as I am concerned, for to have a good sense about the seasons and months and years properly belongs not only to agriculture and navigation, but also to no less to military strategy. You are amusing, as it is likely you are afraid that the multitude may think you are recommending useless studies. But this study is not altogether contemptible, even though it is difficult to persuade them that by each of these studies a certain organ in the soul is both purified and rekindled, which was being destroyed and blinded by pursuits of another kind. An organ which is better worth saving than innumerable eyes, since the truth is seen by self alone. Thus, on the one hand, to those who share the same opinion, you will appear so as to speak extraordinarily well, but on the other hand, to those who have never perceived this, will probably be, for they see no other benefit from these studies themselves that is worthy of speech. Consider then, from this point of view, which of these two groups are you addressing, or do you address neither of them? But the words were produced primarily for the sake of thyself, yet you will not begrudge anyone else any benefit they may gain from themselves. In this latter way, primarily for the sake of myself, I choose to speak both through question and answer. Come then, and let us go back, For surely we have not just now rightly taken up the study that follows immediately after geometry. How did we fail to take it up? After a plane surface, we immediately took up a solid, being in motion, before we took it up, self by self. But if we, what does that mean? Let's look at this bit. So after a plane surface, so they're going through the different subjects that will help the people learning it look further up into the truth of things, from what I understand. And so they started off by saying that people should be learning this geometry, so the plane surfaces. Then they looked at the solids, but then they moved to astronomy, which are the solids in motion. And I'm not sure how this has been translated here. Before we took it up, self by self, which is that Greek bit there, but I'm not sure what that means. But if we had proceeded rightly, should have taken this third power consecutively after the second. Thus, this is certainly the power of the cubes, which is also that which participates of depth. Okay, so yeah, so if you're going to study, you need to go from two-dimensional shapes to three-dimensional shapes. Power of cubes, which is also that which participates of depth. Well, they did geometry. What was the second study? Okay, so the first was arithmetic, the second was geometry, and then the third was astronomy. But they jumped one, as in I think they should have put in the solids, the three-dimensional shapes to study. I think that's what they're getting on at here. So consecutively after the second. Thus, this is certainly the power of cubes, which is also that which participates of depth. It is so, but these indeed, O Socrates, seem to be not yet discovered. The causes of this are twofold. First of all, because being difficult, there is no city that holds selves in honor, these in honor. I mean, why have we got selves in honor? I think they mean these selves as in solid geometry, not selves as in any self. That's what they were referring to, I think, and are thus investigated rather anemically. And second of all, because those who do investigate these are in need of a guide without whom they cannot discover them. First, on the one hand, they are difficult to be obtained, and when they are obtained, as the situation is at present, those who investigate concerning them, I'd say, rather than themselves, will not obey by thinking too highly of themselves. But if, on the other hand, the whole city would join in superintending them by holding them in high esteem, both the very ones who inquired into them would be obedient, and their inquiries, by being engaged in constantly and vigorously, would bring to light whatsoever they have to be, since even now they are despised by the multitude and cut short by their investigators, who are unable to give an account of their usefulness. However, they forcibly increase in number, regardless of all these are disadvantaged by their inherent grace. So people are still interested in the subject because it's, I don't know, graceful. Nor would it be wonderful that cells should also come to light. Nor would it be wonderful that I still think it's these, as in the solid geometry things, should also come to light. And surely on the one hand, this grace also has to be quite remarkable. But tell me more clearly what you were just now saying, for somehow, on the one hand, you laid down the study of a plane surface as geometry, two and three dimensional static. Well, no, maybe it's just two dimensional, but let's see. Yes. Next, after this study, at first you laid down astronomy, but afterwards you drew back. Yeah, because astronomy is the movement of the three dimensionals, which is not the next one in the series. Socrates. That is because while I was hurrying to uncover all these matters rapidly, I advanced more slowly. More haste, less speed. For that power increase of depth was by method next in order, but we passed her over because the investigation of it is ridiculous. And after geometry, we mention astronomy, which is about solids in motion. Exactly. You speak correctly. Now then, we establish astronomy as the fourth study, assuming that solid geometry, which we now set aside, subsists for us, if only the city shall support self. Support it, isn't it? What's all this? Why always use this self? Is this an aside here? For yeah, right. So one is arithmetic, second is geometry on the plane, two dimensional. Third is geometry solid, which is the one they omitted. And then lastly is astronomy. So that was on the side. Okay, Glaucon. It is reasonable. And now I will praise astronomy, O Socrates, in the way that you regard pursue her, for which you reproved me just now for praising her in a commonly vulgar way. For it appears to me that it is clear to everyone that it indeed compels the soul to look at that which is above, and from things here, she leads her there. It is equally reasonable that it is clear to everyone except to me, for it does not appear in this way to me. How then? On the one hand, the way in which it is now handled by those who introduce her into philosophy entirely makes the soul to look downwards. I'm assuming her is astronomy that they're talking about. So at the moment, so I think he's saying the way in which astronomy is now handled by those introducing it into philosophy makes the soul look downwards. And the whole point of introducing these subjects is to make the soul look upwards. So I guess he's got an issue with it. Um, what do you mean by this? You seem to me to grasp within thyself no ignoble opinion of the study about those which are above. For you venture to think that if anyone, by looking up, should really learn something by staring at the spangled decorations on a ceiling, and are led to believe that it is contemplating by intellect, but not with the eyes. I think he's I think Glaucon was saying, astronomy is one of these that makes the soul look upwards, because he was saying the celestial bodies are in the sky. So he was just literally looking upwards to see them. So I think Socrates is saying, well, yeah, not in a literal sense, that doesn't matter. Yeah, because he's saying, for you venture to think that if anyone, by looking up, should really learn something by staring at the spangled decorations on the ceiling, and are led to believe that self is contemplating by intellect, but not with the eyes. Yeah. Thus, perhaps you think beautifully, while I, on the other hand, think simply, for I, in turn, am not able to conceive that any other study can make the soul look above, except that which must be about the being, to on, and inasmuch as it is about that which is invisible. But if a person attempts to learn anything about sensible objects by gaping upwards, or with eyes shut downwards, I say that the self cannot ever learn, for there can be no knowledge of such things. For the soul of self is not looking above, but below, even while studying, floating on their back, either at land or at sea. Um, okay, what does that mean? If a person's to learn, attempts to learn anything about sensible objects, okay, so like literally the stars rather than the forms or abstract ideas behind those celestial bodies. So if they're looking at literally the objects that are perceived by the sense, even if they're looking upwards, gaping upwards, or with eyes shut downwards, I say that self cannot ever learn, for there can be no knowledge of such things. Okay, well, that's the point that he's been making, that you can't have knowledge of this, um, of the objects perceived by sense. There can be no knowledge of such things, for the soul of self is not, for the soul of self is not looking above. Oh, so while they're doing, yeah, so while you are looking at these sense perceptions, you're not looking above, even if you're looking up with your eyes, but the intellect is not looking above, but below, even while studying, floating on their back, either at land or at sea. I stand justly corrected, says Glaucon, for you have correctly reproved me. Reproached? Reproved me. I don't know what that letter is. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, you correctly reproved me. But surely then, what did you mean by saying that astronomy should be learned contrary to the way in which it is being learned at present? If their learning is to be useful for what we say? But surely then, what do you mean by saying that astronomy should be learned, okay, differently, contrary to the way in which it is being learned at present, if their learning is to be useful for what we say? Socrates, in the following way. On the one hand, that these spangled bodies in the heaven, as they are indeed spangled ornamentations in a visible medium, be thought to be most beautiful and the most accurate of their kind, but far inferior to the true ones, such as the being of the motion, whether quick or slow in true number, and in all true figures, both in relation to one another, which also carry the beings that are carried along in them. Whoa, that one's tough to read. Okay, what's going on? So, on the one hand, these celestial bodies in the heaven, as they are indeed, pretty in a visible medium. Okay, so the sight of them be thought to be most beautiful and the most accurate of their kind, which I imagine he wouldn't be happy with, because I think he's talking about sense perception, as in that's why it's a visible medium, but and hence far inferior to the true ones, as in more essential things, such as the being of the motion for us, whether quick or slow in true number. Okay, so I think he's trying to get behind the visible medium and is talking about the things that are going on behind the scene more abstractly in terms of the motion, speed, and I don't know, in true number and in all true figures. both in relation to one another, which also carry the beings that are carried along in them. Surely then, which aspects, on the one hand, are comprehended by the power of the Logos and of the understanding, dianoia, but not, on the other hand, by sight, or does thou think they can? I think I need another translation here, because this is not really readable. 529D. Let's see if I can get one. So on 529D. Five two nine. 529D. Okay, so let's see. This is the same bit. Thus said I, these sparks that paint the sky, since they are decorations on a visible surface, okay, we must regard to be sure as the fairest and most exact of material things, but we must recognize that they fall far short of the truth, the movements, namely of real speed and real slowness in true numbers and in all true figures, both in relation to one another and as vehicles of the things they carry and contain. These can be apprehended only by reason and thought, but not by sight. Or do you think otherwise? Well, that made more sense. Other than, I'm not sure what they mean here when they say real speed, real slowness in true number and in all true figures here, both in relation to one another and as vehicles of the things they carry and contain. Are we talking about planets here? Celestial bodies. So I can see that, yeah, you can calculate things in relation to one another, because with the solid geometry, you were just looking at like one shape, one solid. But here with astronomy, there also it's the movement and their interaction. So I can see that it's both in relation to one another. But what does this mean? As vehicles of the things they carry and contain. Well, obviously, like Earth contains other solids. So I don't know whether that's what. Oh, or maybe like there's orbiting, like Saturn's got a load of moons. And so they're vehicles of the, and they're orbiting around Saturn while Saturn's orbiting around the sun. So maybe that's the kind of thing it's referring to. Anyway, these can be apprehended only by reason and thought, but not by sight. Or do you think otherwise? By no means, he said. Then, said I, we must use the blazonry of the heavens as patterns to aid in the study of those realities, just as one would do who chanced upon diagrams drawn with special care and elaboration by Daedalus or some other craftsman or painter. Thus we must use the blazonry of the heavens as patterns to aid in the study of those realities. Patterns to aid in the study of those realities, just as one. I think realities that mean more essential truths. Just as one would do who chanced upon diagrams drawn with special care and elaboration by Daedalus or some other craftsman or painter. For anyone acquainted with geometry who saw such designs would admit the beauty of the workmanship, but would think it absurd to examine them seriously in expectation of finding them in the absolute truth. Let's do that again. So, for anyone acquainted with geometry who saw such designs, would admit the beauty of the workmanship, but would think it absurd to examine them seriously in expectation of finding them in the absolute truth. What, the diagrams? Oh, right. So what? He's making models for things and doing dry. He's building things, so he's done diagrams to plan them out. And they're not going to be precise because they're going to be written on real paper. And even though he's taking great care and elaboration, just like you can't draw a perfect circle, he can't draw, on his thing, he can't draw the plans as precisely. But then the only thing that's confusing is that the things that are made from his plans are also like physical, visible objects, which are probably imprecise in some way. But still, the point still stands. They're not gonna, you're not gonna, you can examine them for patterns to aid in the study of those realities, but you won't be able to examine them seriously in expectation of finding in them the absolute truth. I think that makes sense. Okay, next page. 530. With regard to equals or doubles or any other ratio. How could it be otherwise than absurd, he said. Do you not think, said I, that one who was an astronomer, in very truth, would feel in the same way when he turned his eyes upon the movements of the stars? He will be willing to concede that the artisan of heaven fashioned it and ordered it contains in the best possible manner for such a fabric. But when it comes to the proportions of day and night, and of their relation to the month, and that of the month to the year, and of the other stars to these and one another, do you not suppose that he will regard as a very strange fellow the man who believes that these things go on forever without change, or the least deviation, though they possess bodies and are visible objects, and that his unremitting quest, the realities of these things? Um, okay, what's being said here? Don't quite get it. So, because these things are changing, so if an astronomer is looking at the celestial bodies, the movement of the stars, um, when it comes, so he will be willing to concede that the artisan of heaven fashioned it, etc., etc. Do you not suppose that he will regard as a very strange fellow, the man who believes that these things go on forever without change? Okay, so the bodies change. Yeah. Oh. Oh, okay. Maybe I get it. The you can study the planets in the skies, and you can expect them to do certain things if you were thinking about them as purely objects like spheres, but they're not perfect spheres. Therefore, and that's because of wear and tear and I don't know discrepancies. So you can model it abstractly, but the situation in the sky won't fit the the perfect models because of change. What did he say here? Yeah, I think that's fine. I at least do think so, he said. Now that I hear it from you. It is by means of problems, then, said I, as in the study of geometry, that we will pursue astronomy too, and we will let be the things in the heavens, if we are to have a part in the true science of astronomy, and so convert to right use of the soul. Okay, so what's he saying here? Um, so he's putting forward astronomy as a subject that will help you get to the essential truths, and it is means of problems, then, said I, as in the study of geometry, that we will pursue astronomy too. So they're going to put it in the list of things that will help you move your soul to look in the right direction towards the essential truths. And we will let be the things in heaven if we have to have a part in the true science of astronomy, and so convert to right use from uselessness that natural indwelling intelligence of the soul. So again, I make the natural indwelling intelligence of the soul more useful by looking at astronomy, but not in the sense of the actual body. Two of them are apparent. What are they? In addition to astronomy, its counterpart, I replied. What is that? We may venture to suppose, I said, that as the eyes are framed for astronomy, so the ears are framed for the movements of harmony, and these are in some sort kindred sciences, as the Pythagoreans affirm, and we admit, do we not, Glaucon? Right, okay, that's nice. So they just looked at the movement, the study of the celestial bodies, as in they looked at solid geometry, then the celestial bodies, the difference being that those are not just one solid at any time, but many solids in motion and interacting with one another. And now he's drawing the parallel with the movements of harmony. Hmm, right. And then references the Pythagoreans. Okay. So they've moved from the visible to the audible. Okay, so for the movements of harmony, and these are in some their kindred sciences. Okay. We do, he said. Then, said I, since the task is so great, shall we not inquire of them what their opinion is, and whether they have anything to add? And we, in all this, will be on the watch for what concerns us. What is that? To prevent our fosterlings from attempting to learn anything that does not conduce to the end we have in view, and does not always come out at what we said ought to be the goal of everything, as we were just now saying about astronomy. Okay, so now on to 531. Or do you not know that they repeat the same procedure in the case of their ears alongside, as if trying to catch a voice from next door? Some affirm that they can hear a note between, and this is the least interval and the unit of measurement, while others insist that the strings now render identical sounds, both preferring their ears to their minds. Yeah, so this is the point. Like in the in the realm of sense perceptions, there will be discrepancies, and there'll be different opinions. One will see things as being perfectly in tune, but if you've got a different ear to the next guy, you might see a discrepancy. So, but if you go behind it to the essential truth of things, then you can talk just like you can in number about perfect shapes like squares and circles, the analogous thing for sounds. So that bit again, they talk of something they call minims, and laying their ears alongside as if trying to catch a voice from next door. Some affirm that they can hear a note between, and this is the least interval and the unit of measurement, while others insist that the strings now render identical sounds, both preferring their ears to their minds. You, said I, are speaking of the worthies who vex and torture the strings and rack them on the pegs, but not to draw out the comparison with strokes of the plectrum and the musician's complaints of too responsive and too reluctant strings, I drop the figure and tell you that I do not mean these people, but those others whom we just now said we would interrogate about harmony. Their method exactly corresponds to that of the astronomer, for the numbers they seek are those found in the herd concourse, but they do not ascend to generalized problems and the consideration which numbers are inherently concordant and which not, and why in each case. So yeah, they're looking at they seek are those found in herd concords. So again, sense perception, and they do not ascend to generalized problems and the consideration which numbers are inherently concordant and which not, and why in each case. A superhuman task, he said. Say rather useful, said I, for the investigation of the beautiful and the good, but if otherwise pursued, useless. Hmm. That is likely, he said. And what is more, I said, I take it that if the investigation of all these studies goes far enough to bring out their community and kinship with one another, and to infer their affinities, then to busy ourselves with them contributes to our desired end, and the labour taken is not lost, but otherwise it is in vain. I too so surmise. Okay, let's do that bit again. So, and what is more, I take it that if the investigation of all these studies, so the arithmetic, the geometry, solid geometry, and astronomy, and the harmonies, goes far enough to bring out their community and kinship, so the relation between all these, and to infer their affinities, then to busy ourselves with them contributes to our desired end, which is to turn the soul towards more essential truths, and the labor taken is not lost. But otherwise, if you don't do that, it is in vain. I too surmise, said he, but it is a huge task of which you speak. Socrates, are you talking about the prelude? I said, or what? Or do we not know that all this is but the preamble of the law itself, the prelude of the strain that we have to apprehend? For you surely do not suppose that experts in these matters are reasoners and dialecticians. No, by Zeus, he said, except a very few whom I have met. But have you ever supposed, I said, that men who could not render and exact an account of opinions in discussion would ever know anything of the things we say must be known? Right, okay, what are we talking about here? So, some kind of prelude, or do we not know that all this is but the preamble of the law itself, the prelude of the strain that we have to apprehend, and dialecticians? No, by Zeus, except a very few whom I have met. But have you ever supposed, I said, that men who could not render an exact an account of opinions in discussions would ever know anything of the things we must say must be known? Well, I like that bit because that is, have you ever supposed, he said, that men who cannot render and exact an account of opinions in discussion would ever know anything of the things we must say must be known? So to be able to give an account of something is to show that you can is to show that you know them. Okay. 532. No is surely the answer to that too. This then, at last, Glaucon, I said, is the very law which dialectics recites, the strain which it executes, of which, though it belongs to the intelligible, we may see an imitation in the progress of the faculty of vision as we described, its endeavour to look at living things themselves and the stars themselves, and finally at the very sun. In like manner, When anyone by dialectics attempts through discourse of reason and apart from all perception of sense to find his way to the very essence of each thing and does not desist, till he apprehends by thought itself the nature of the good in itself, he arrives at the limits of the intelligible, as the other in our parable came to goal of the visible. Ah, okay, well, there's quite a lot there. So then, this then at last, Glaucon, I said, is the very law which dialectics recites. So dialectics is the technique, I imagine, of turning the soul to the most essential things. And so the strain which it executes, of which, though it belongs to the intelligible, we may see an imitation in the progress as we described its endeavor to look at living things themselves and the stars itself and finding it the very sun. So the progression is analogous in the visible realm as it is in the thought or intelligible realm. In like manner, when anyone by dialectics attempts through discourse of reason and apart from all perceptions of sense, so you're not using sense perception anymore. This is the use in geometry, the difference between this perfect circle in your mind, which you can see through your thought, so not through your eyes. So you need to be apart from all perceptions of sense. And then to find his way to the very essence of each thing and does not desist till he apprehends by thought itself the nature of the good in itself, he arrives at the limit of the intelligible. So, as the other in our parable came to the goal of the visible. Okay, so the end of all this, what you can do with the mind, I think he's saying, is when you arrive at the nature of the good in itself. By all means, he said, what then, will you not call this progress of thought dialectic? Surely. And the release from bonds, I said, and the conversion from the shadows to the images that cast them, and to the light, and the ascent from the subterranean cavern to the world above, and there the persisting inability to look directly at animals and plants and the light of the sun, but the ability to see the phantasms created by God in water and shadows of objects that are real and not merely, as before, the shadows of images cast through a light which, compared with the sun, is as unreal as they. All this procedure of the arts and sciences that we have described indicates their power to lead the best part of the soul up to the contemplation of what is best among realities, as in our parable, the clearest organ in the body was turned to the contemplation of what is brightest in the corporeal and visible region. So he's referring to the cave story again, and showing how the use of these studies, progressing from arithmetic to geometry, geometry to solid geometry to the study of celestial bodies as astronomy, and also harmonies, but in each one, not looking at not using the sense perception to look at those bodies themselves, like drawn squares or actual moving planets in the sky, but always trying to turn the soul towards the most essential things. So, not the drawn square, not the drawn circle, but the pure circle that you can apprehend in your mind through dialectic, through reasoning, and eventually to look at the essence of the good in itself or the form of the good itself. Um, and that is what happened to those in the caves. The analogy is of them perceiving things to be one way and then being shown that there is more to it. And this is what he's trying to do, is show that you can also do that by turning your soul to these more essential truths, is my understanding of it. I accept this, he said, as the truth, and yet it appears to me very hard to accept, and again, from another point of view, hard to reject. Nevertheless, since we have not to hear it at this time only, but are to repeat it often hereafter, let us assume that these things are as now has been said, and proceed to the melody itself, and go through with it as we have gone through the prelude. Tell me then, what is the nature of this faculty of dialectic? Into what divisions does it on the road, and then come to the end of our journeying? So now they want to know more of what this study of faculty of dialectic is. Maybe this is how do you actually more clearly define what you're doing in these studies to turn away from the sense perception and start um, thinking more about the essential truths. Okay, on we go then. 532 to 533. You will not be able, dear Glaucon, to follow me further, though on my part there will be no lack of goodwill, and, if I could, I would show you no longer an image and symbol of my meaning, but the very truth as it appears to me, though whether rightly or not I may not properly affirm. But that something like this is what we have to see and must affirm. Is that not so? Surely. And may we not also declare that nothing less than the power of dialectics could reveal this, and that only to one experienced in the studies we have described, and that the thing is in no otherwise possible? Essential truths of things is through having studied the arithmetic, geometry, and so on that he mentioned before. But I'm not sure. I don't know about that. I mean, it probably helps, but I don't know why it has to be. In any case, that too, he said, we may properly affirm. This at any rate, and in all cases to determine what each thing really is. Yeah, right. So just as a side point, when you're doing in mathematics and people say 1 plus 1 is 2, if you're on one level, that's really simple. But on another level, if you're trying to look at what the things are, determine what each thing really is, you can spend a lot more time in thinking, well, what does it mean? What are these ones that are all the same that can be added to make a two? And you look at the essential nature of those numbers and what they mean as thoughts, rather than just as calculations. The dialectic is something that attempts systematically and in all cases to determine what each thing really is. But all the other arts have for their object the opinions and desires of men, or are wholly concerned with generation and composition, or with the service attendance of things that grow and are put together, while the remnant, which we said did in some sort lay hold on reality, geometry, and the studies that accompany it. So all the other subjects, other than these, which also can deal with sense perceptions, but are able to help you turn your soul away from sense perception to more essential truths. All the other things have as their object opinions, desires of men, concern with generation, composition, as in the things that the and composition, or with services and attendance of things that grow. So these are all changing things and are put together, while the remnant, which we said did in some sort lay hold on reality, and by that I think he means unchanging reality, the essence of things. Geometry and the studies that accompany it are, as we see, dreaming about being, but the clear waking vision of it is impossible for them as long as they leave the assumptions which they employ undisturbed and cannot give any account of them. So I think here he's talking again in mathematics, you can often get to quite, you can get, you can make conclusions based on assumptions, but quite often those assumptions which lead to those conclusions are never looked into further. I think that's what he's saying here. It is impossible for them as long as they leave the assumptions which they employ undisturbed and cannot give an account. All that intervenes is a tissue of things not really known. What possibility is there that assent in such cases can ever be converted into true knowledge or science? None, he said. Then, said I, is not dialectics the only process of inquiry that advances in this manner, doing away with hypotheses up to the first principle itself in order to find confirmation there? And it is literally true that when the eye of the soul is sunk in any case, when the eye of the soul is sunk, dialectic gently draws it forth and leads it up, employing as helpers and cooperators in this conversion the studies and sciences which we enumerated, which we called sciences, often from habit, though they really need some other designation, connoting more clearness than opinion, and more obscurity than science. Understanding, I believe, was the term we employed, but I presume we shall not dispute about the name, when things of such moment lie before us for consideration. No, indeed, he said. Are you satisfied then, said I as before, to call the first division science? Okay, so I think he's saying the ones that we've enumerated, which we called sciences often from habit, although they need some other designation because they're more clear than opinion, but they're more obscure than science. I'd like to know what Greek words are there for opinion and science and understanding. So, given what we on 533, so at the bottom of 533, just take a little moment to take a look at those. The bottom of 533, just because I want to know which terms, because some of these terms will be in that divided line. Just okay, so the bottom of 533. Okay, so how's it here? Okay, buried in a barbaric bar. By using those arts we have described in detail as handmaidens and assistants in conversion, which on the one hand through custom we frequently call forms of knowledge. Oh, pros, what's this? Prosepomen epistemas. Oh, I don't know these words, but this one, episteme. But on the other hand, which we frequently call forms of knowledge. What was it here? Which we frequently call, which we call, hmm, which we call science, often from habit. Frequently call forms of knowledge. Well, that's confusing. Anyway, let's assume, so that's what he means by science. But on the other hand, they require another designation that is, on the one hand, more clear than opinion. So what's that? Do something. Um, so let's see how you say this one. You can't copy it directly out of that. So you have to go via that. Doxis.
Doxis.
Doxis. Doxis. Okay, so that's opinion. Doxis, then opinion. But on the other hand, more obscure than knowledge, epistemos. I'd like to know how to say that. Um, okay, let's see how you say this one. Epistemis.
Επιστημής.
Epistemis. Epistemis. Okay, cool. So that's knowledge. But somewhere in the preceding logos, we have indeed defined self as the power of the understanding. Okay, so now we've got another one. Well, I can read that one. That one's dianoian. 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 Yeah, dianoian. Okay. Whereas this is not as it appears to me about a name where such manners. Okay, so then let's put those all back in here. Cooperators, the conversion studies and sciences. So that was episteme, I think. So they really need some other designation connoting more clearness than opinion, which was the doxis, and more obscurity than science, which was the episteme then, but understanding, I think, was the dianoia, I believe was the term we employed. Okay, so next one. 534. The second understanding, the third belief, and the fourth conjecture or picture thought, and the last two collectively opinion, and the first two intellection. Oh, okay, so no, indeed, he said. Are you satisfied then, said I, as before, to call the first division science, the first division of the divided line science, as in episteme? Let's just check that. First part, knowledge. Okay, but they're both talking about epistemen. So the first part of the dialectic is epistemen. Okay, let's see. So epistemen, something like that. One of them called it knowledge. One translation called it knowledge. The other one called it science. Okay. So it is sufficient then. On the one hand, first part knowledge, just okay, no, sorry, I want the web one. Then the second, understanding, the third, belief, and the fourth, conjecture or picture thought. Whoa, okay. Second, understanding, third, belief. So we need to do this again. So one, so it's split and then split again. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we did the first one was so knowledge. Second one, understanding. Third, belief. And fourth, conjecture or picture thought. Whoa. Conjecture or picture thought. But I want to know Greek for all these. So in the Balboa translation, the first one is knowledge epistemen. So that one's epistemen. Then understanding dianoian, there it is. Then belief, call it trust. So which word is it? What's this? Triten. Oh, that's third. Tree. So there must be this word here. Pistin. Pistin. He calls it trust. So let's put that there. And then the last one, image thinking. Tet. Tetar. Tetarten. So that must be fourth. Acasian. Acacia. Acasian. Okay. In any case, let's go back to the reading. So, third belief, the fourth conjecture or picture thought, and the last two collectively opinion. Okay, last two collectively opinion, which they are saying is doxan. Okay, let's put that in. Last two collectively are opinion. And the last two, and the first two, intellection. And so how's that translated? On the other, intellection. Non-sin? Whoa. Intellection. Non. I need that word. I don't know how you say that word. Okay. Let's put him in here. And then Google Translate him. Or is it? Oh, noisin. Don't need a question mark. How do you say that?
Noisin.
Oh, like gnosis. Right, I get you. Okay. So let's put him in a diagram. So this intellection here, intellection. I believe that's how it goes. Okay, back to the story. Right, and the last two collectively opinion, and the first two intellection. Opinion dealing with generation, and intellection with essence. So another way of saying generation is things that are always changing or coming to be, and intellection with essence or unchanging. And this relation being expressed in the proportion as essence is to generation. Okay, we better put these in. So this is the world of. Oh, I could do a different color. This is the world of. Let me just undo that. This is the world of generation or coming to be or change. Not chance, change. And this is the world of essence unchanging. So, and the last two collectively opinion, the first two intellection. Opinion dealing with generation and intellection with essence, and this relation being expressed in the proportion as essence is to generation, so is intellection to opinion, which we've done, as in the red is the essence and the generation, intellection to opinion, and as intellection is to opinion, so is science to belief. Science being this one was also sorry, this one was also known as science. So science is to belief, so that to that. All right, and therefore the other relationship is so understanding is to that, because they're saying as essence is to generation, so intellect is to opinion. Well, there, that's okay. And so, and as knowledge is to belief, I imagine the next one is that understanding is to whatever you want to call this one, image thinking, picture thought, image thinking. So he's just describing all the different relationships you can talk about in that line, and understanding to image thinking. Yeah, but the relation between their objects, their objective correlates, and the division into two parts of each of these, definable, namely, and intelligible, let us dismiss. Glaucon, lest it involve us in discussion many times as long as the proceeding. I don't understand that, but they're saying it's going to be tough, so let's also skip it. Well, he said, I agree with you about the rest of it, so far as I am able to follow. And do you not also give the name dialectician to the man who is able to exact an account of the essence of each thing? And will you not say that the one who is unable to do this, insofar as he is incapable of rendering an account to himself and others? So, again, that thing of not being able to give an account, does not possess full reason and intelligence about the matter. How could I say that he does? He replied. And is not this true? Sorry. And is this and is not this true of the good likewise, that the man who is unable to define in his discourse and distinguish and abstract from all other things the aspect or idea of the good, and who cannot, as it were in battle, running the gauntlet of all tests, and striving to examine everything by essential reality and not by opinion, hold on his way through all this without tripping in his reason, the man who lacks this power, you will say, does not really know the good itself or any particular good. Hmm. So these are the qualities of reasoning you need to have in order to know the good itself or any particular good. But if he apprehends any adumbration, uh, what does that mean? Adumbrate, to give a sketchy outline. Okay, got you. Of, but if he apprehends any adumbration of it, his contact with it is by opinion, not by knowledge. And dreaming and dozing through his present life before he awakens here, he will arrive at the house of Hades and fall asleep forever. Yes, by Zeus, he said he, all this I will stoutly affirm. But surely, said I, if you should ever nurture, in fact, your children, whom you are now nurturing and educating in word, You would not suffer them, I presume, to hold rule in the state and determine the greatest matters, being themselves as irrational as the lines so called in geometry. Why no, he said. Then you will provide by law that they shall give special heed to the discipline that will enable them to ask and answer questions in the most scientific manner. I will so legislate, he said, in conjunction with you. Do you agree then, said I, that we have set dialectics above all other studies to be, as it were, the coping stone, and that no other higher kind of study could rightly be placed above it? Okay, I think that's probably enough for this evening, other than I want to go through this bit about knowing the good, because it goes through some qualities. So, the man who is unable to define in his discourse and distinguish and abstract from all other things the aspect or idea of the good, and who cannot, as it were in battle, running the gauntlet of all tests, and striving to examine everything by essential reality, not by opinion, hold on his way through all this without tripping in his reasoning. The man who lacks this power, you will say, does not really know the good itself or any particular good. But if he apprehends any sketchy outline of it, his contact with it is by opinion. All right, so if he holds any sketchy outline, his contact with it is by opinion, not by knowledge. And dreaming and dozing through his present life before he awakens here, he will arrive at the house of no. Okay, yeah. Well, I don't know this having this. I mean, okay, fine. Having a sketchy outline is not as good as knowing it. But knowing what's good is pretty tough. So I'm all for learning how you get close to it. But I think a sketchy outline is a good start. But I think he's saying he was unable, so you need to define in discourse. Okay, so fine. So instead of a sketchy outline, you need to define, distinguish, abstract from all other things. Running the gauntlet of all tests, striving to examine everything by essential reality, not by opinion, hold on his way through all this without tripping in his reasoning. The man who lacks this power, you will say, does not really know the good itself or any particular good. Well, that's me then. But if he apprehends any adumbration or sketchy outline of it, his contact with it is by opinion, not by knowledge. I don't know that really helps to say how you do it, other than, you should know that you've probably got a sketchy outline, and then that's that. In any case, I think that's enough for today. We're finished on 534, so the next session will start at 535.